Really a pleasure for me to moderate today's program. Well, we are in the Western Cape. For those who are just thinking, oh, where we are in Parliament, as we know. So thank you so much and welcome to our excellencies who have joined us, heads of mission, who are here. Thank you so much. I know that some of the speakers and guests are still struggling with parking. So I know by the next 30 minutes, this hall will be in full capacity. So because of time and also respecting the program, we wanted to start in earnest. So we would like this opportunity to officially welcoming you to this important town hall. We've been going around the world talking about South Africa's presidency of the G20 and what it means for South Africa and particularly for the continent. And it really gives us a great pleasure that as much as South Africa is involved in the world, we also have an opportunity to do programs at various provinces. And we have decided that we're going to officially engage with various stakeholders, from business to community organizations, but also think tanks. And as we've heard, I know that there's information overload already as far as South Africa's G20 is concerned, with various working groups that have already taken place. And one of the issues that the academic institutions play a critical role in these important engagements, because they also critically ask us in terms of what is the benefit therefore for South Africa to assume this presidency for the first time. And the academic institutions have come forth to engage with us, and we also have the University of South Africa. So no surprise that this town hall engagements have been happening across various campuses, and we've been in Pretoria at the UNISA main campus, and we've been to Mpumalanga as well, and we're also going to KwaZulu-Natal province. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to officially start the program by welcoming you, but also because as much as we're in Parliament, this important program is being organized in collaboration with the University of South Africa. So we would like to invite our UNISA Western Cape Regional Director on behalf of the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Linkabula, and we'd like to officially welcome Mr. Mutale Mkhwang to officially welcome us to this important engagement. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Program Director, Mr. Charlie Mujezi from DELCO. We acknowledge in our presence GCIS as the host of this G20 community engagement. We also recognize in absentia the Principal and the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa, Prof. Puleng Linkabula. Ms. Ntabiseng Malefane, the Department of International Relations. Members of the Diplomatic Corps representing various countries to South Africa. Dr. Rashid Tofi, the Deputy Director General of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism here in the Western Cape. Ms. Leanne Singer, who is Marketing Director from Singer Group. Ms. Lerato Nkosi, who is a lecturer from UNISA in Pretoria. We also welcome Mr. Surprise Malhase from the Public Diplomacy at the Department of International Relations. Chairperson of the Regional Student Representative Council, Ms. Nomfundo Kumalo, and the students in attendance today. Representative from national, provincial, local government, legal representatives, business community in presence, civil society, political parties, research institute, Institute of Higher Learning, various organizations and foundations who have honored this invitation here today. Representatives from the various media houses present here, and those joining virtually, the community of the Western Cape, fellow colleagues, and the members of the university community. I stand before you today in our national legislative capital, Cape Town, in the Western Cape, to welcome you to this august event, namely the G20 Community Engagement Town Hall. I do so with deep humility and great appreciation for the significance of this gathering. Allow me to begin by standing on the shoulders of the giants, the towering leadership of the University of South Africa, UNISA, and the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, that is DIRCO. It is upon this foundation that they have laid that we gather here today. The 152 years of UNISA's history as an academic institution is punctuated with foresight, innovation, and enduring legacy of making higher education available to all, irrespective of their geographic location or socio-economic background. We are proud to have contributed to the career of several ethical leaders who have shaped and continue to shape our democratic state. Renowned for its notable alumni, UNISA has been the educational home for the prominent figures such as the first democratic president of South Africa, His Excellency Nelson Mandela, the current South African president, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, and the former Minister of Defense, Ms. Thandi Modise, among many others influential leaders. Notably, the second democratic president of South Africa, His Excellency Dr. Thabo Mbeki, is both an alumnus and the Chancellor of the University of South Africa, the University of the Land. And so, in that spirit, let me say Thobela, Absheni, Mateloni, Sanbonani, good morning, Goeiemorgen, Molweni, Dumelang. Thank you. From this Africa's leading comprehensive open distance e-learning university, I would like to convey the message of welcome and solidarity from our Chancellor, His Excellency Dr. Thabo Mbeki, former President of the Republic of South Africa, the UNISA Council Chair, Dr. D.D. Musia, and our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Linkabula, in whose shoes I am stepping in, as well as the entire epistemic UNISA community. As we all gather here physically today, let me assure you that we are joined virtually by colleagues and students from all over South Africa, the continent at large, and indeed the globe. That, in my view, is the power of the university such as UNISA, a comprehensive open distance and e-learning CODEL, in short, institution. We are especially proud and honored as South Africa prepares to host the G20 summit in 2025. This is not only a diplomatic milestone, but a moment of renewal and opportunity. A moment that is poised to elevate international cooperation and significantly enhance travel, trade, and development across South Africa. The hosting of such prestigious international summit thus carries with it the potential to stimulate substantial economic activity within the host nation. With the participation from 19 countries, alongside the African Union and the European Union, as well as thousands of international guests who will descend upon our shores, a unique opportunity to elevate the country's standing on the world stage. is availed. It is anticipated that the summit will serve as a catalyst for economic development, generating employment opportunities, and fostering initiatives that support global development agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, during the summit, South Africa will be eager to showcase its capabilities, its natural beauty, and the resilience of its people, while also nurturing a constructive dialogue among nations. Today's theme, I quote, open quote, financial inclusion for economic development, creating access to benefit grassroots economies, close quote, is both timely and urgent. It reminds us that the economic transformation must not remain in the boardrooms and summit halls alone. It must reach the village, the township, the informal trader, the smallholder farmer, the youth, the single parent, and the unemployed graduate alike. True financial inclusion is more than bank accounts or mobile transaction. It is about access to opportunity, the recognition of human dignity, and empowerment of communities. It is about designing systems of justice, not charity, and about creating ecosystems where grassroots voices will not only hear but acted upon. On the panel are people representing a rich diversity of sectors, from mining, agriculture, and tourism to youth organizations, civil society, the business forum, and the women's movements. This broad representation reminds us that our collective efforts across the public, private, and civic spaces are essential to drive change we seek and the Africa we want. Program Director, we need to remind ourselves that the G20 is not only a diplomatic spectacle. It is a strategic lever for transformation, particularly in provinces like the Western Cape. With its strategic location and abundant resources, must seize this opportunity to position itself as a hub of growth and innovation, especially in the areas of tourism, international investment, mining, agriculture, and trade. In short term, we can anticipate increased activity in hospitality and retail, while in the long term, sustainable benefits that directly address the socio-economic challenges that face our people can be expected. In light of the preceding, one can argue that the G20 summit has significant potential to impact skill development for women and the society at large. The solutions to Africa's problems lie within Africa. They lie within us. The Western Cape is known for production of citrus fruits and wines, which are enjoyed across the world. By collaborating with other countries, Western Cape can play a crucial role in enhancing skill development opportunities for women and youth, which would hopefully lead to greater economic growth, equality, and social development within the province. We do so because we are persuaded by the fact that the solution of Africa's problems lie within Africa. Thus, our destiny as Africans is bound together. The Western Cape can be a gateway of hope, not a fence of division. I will not go deeper about what this vibrant province has to offer in our efforts towards the final inclusion of those on the margins of our communities. Let me leave the detailed engagement on the subject to the panel of experts that are in our midst. Chair, Program Director, as I conclude, may I appeal that this town hall will not be an end, but a beginning. May the platform be used for genuine community engagement. May this space be free ideation and frank debates that eventually find expression in the G20 policy frameworks as central pillars for sustainable development. May we do so remembering that grassroots economies are not mundane, they are foundational to any truly inclusive growth. Welcome to the Western Cape G20 Community Engagement. I thank you. Yaleboha. Siyabonga. Enkosi. That's the end of the message, the speech of the principal. Thank you.
A round of applause for very comprehensive welcome, but also a great outline of the opportunities that really was taken by South Africa, because I think we can actually see already how South Africa has really activated itself in terms of taking opportunities that this G20 has taken. I really appreciate your encouragement to say we must not get excited about the diplomatic spectacle. That's an opportunity that we have to grab with both our hands as well. So we are really appreciative of that. Thank you so much for welcoming us on behalf of the UNISA Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Linkabula. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mutari and Kwan. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity. As it's a tradition, we normally will talk about the purpose why we are here, and just a slight changes in our program, but the content remains the same. I also want to take this opportunity to talk about then the state of the readiness, because a lot of work has been done by different working groups in civil society and academia in terms of preparing the amount of work that the heads of state will have to consider and agree upon and declare when they meet in November. And I'm quite happy that I want to invite someone who's very close to action, because sometimes it's good people that actually are involved right inside where the discussions are happening. And I want to invite our Director for Media Liaison, who's very involved in different planning of the heads of state meetings as well. And we are quite happy that besides him being involved in these important preparations for heads of state, he's also going to be a keynote speaker tomorrow at UNISA and main campus. But the good thing is that it's going to be streamed, so you'll be able to catch that tomorrow, because the annual media conference is happening. It's COMSA for those who are at UNISA, and the good thing is that they stream this important engagement. So it's going to be a keynote speaker talking about South Africa's G20. So someone's very, very close to action. Tell us about why we're here and why these engagements are important. So please, let's welcome Mr. Nelson Kwete, who's going to address us to talk about the purpose here. Thank you so much. Give me a hand.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I want to greet everyone. I have an easier task following the previous speaker, because he did a good job of identifying everyone here. And I'm not going to repeat all the dignitaries that he referred to. I want to greet everyone in the room as well. I have an easier task, as I said, because I'm only going to talk about two things. The first thing is the significance of South Africa's G20 membership, and then I'll talk about the preparations for the Leaders Summit at the end. So, colleagues, you will remember that South Africa joined the G20 at its inception in 1997, 1998. That's when the G20 was formed. And the G20 was formed out of a crisis which propelled the leaders of the world to come together and mount a global response to the crisis that was unfolding at that time, which was what is called the Asian financial crisis, which propelled some of the leading economies of the world to come together and agree on how best to respond to this global financial crisis, which began in those countries that were called the Asian tigers, the fastest growing economies in Asia at the time, Singapore, Malaysia, those type of countries. So when they went through a financial crisis that affected the rest of the world, the leaders then came together. At the time, the United States President George W. Bush organized some of the leaders of the world to say, let's come together and form a organization or a forum through which we can mount a global response to the crisis that was unfolding at the time. So that's how South Africa got involved, because when the American president at the time, George W. Bush, looked at who to bring into this grouping, some of the first countries that were invited, Germany, the UK, France, and then you had Russia, and then they looked at the world map, obviously, to say, how best can we select the countries that will help us to mount this global response. So in Asia, they invited China, Indonesia, and then in Africa, we were the only country that was invited to form part of this grouping. In Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and then obviously the USA is the founder of the G20. Then you had other countries, for example, Turkey, which was very important in that region of the world. So it's very important that in Africa at the time, we were considered to be one of the most significant partners that could help this global response to the financial crisis. So South Africa's membership of the G20, from the very from the inception of the G20, was significant because it gave recognition to our country as a significant player in the world economy, but also South Africa looked at this invitation and said, how best can we utilize our membership of the G20 to push the African agenda in that forum? Because we recognized from early on that standing alone in the G20, we would not be able to make an impact. So South Africa was very deliberate from the very beginning to bring some of the issues on the African agenda to the G20 forum. And that's how eventually, it took many years, but eventually we succeeded to get more African voices in the G20. And you will remember that when Indonesia hosted the summit 4 years ago, the resolution was taken that the African Union must be a full member of the G20. The African Union had been invited to various summits of the G20 at South Africa's instigation over the years. South Africa had pushed that issue of the involvement of the African Union, because you would know that the G20 is formed out of 19 countries originally, and then the European Union. So the Europeans had a double dip, because you had France already, that got the UK, and those are some of the biggest economies, Germany, and then they also are supplemented by the European Union on the agenda. So South Africa had always been pushing for the involvement of the African Union to make sure that issues on the African agenda are reflected on the G20's agenda as well. So our membership is significant for us, but for the continent, hence the involvement of the African Union. But I just want to say, South Africa is privileged to be chairing the summit this year. You would know that the first summit of the G20, initially when it was formed, it was a meeting of finance ministers. As I said earlier, it was formed as a response to a global financial crisis. So it was a meeting of finance ministers. When South Africa hosted the G20 finance ministers meeting in 2007, at that time already there were indications that another crisis was in the making, another global financial crisis. But this time it was not originating from the previous crisis in Asia. It was a crisis unfolding in the USA, another global financial crisis which was now taking place. Mainly, it started in the housing market, where the so-called reckless lending had led to a meltdown in the financial sector, especially the banking sector in America. So when the USA followed the next year in 2008 to host the summit, the president then decided to elevate the G20 to a summit level and invited the world leaders to come together. Again, like in 1997, when there was a crisis in East Asia, 2007, 10 years later, another crisis. So the world had not learned from the Asian financial crisis, so it was unfolding again. And so the G20 was then elevated to a leaders summit starting in the USA. So South Africa again participated in that summit and again tried to bring to the fore the impact that this was having on African countries. Because most of the time, when countries in the West are going through a crisis, the first thing they do was obviously to rescue their financial sector at the time. But the impact on the continent was an afterthought. So South Africa had to bring that to the fore yet again. So that was very significant for us. Since then, the G20 has become a broader in terms of its focus from its original position as a meeting of finance ministers. Then, once the leaders took over the G20, then they started to bring other issues onto the agenda of the G20. It was no longer just only focusing on finance, on the economy, but now broadly even on politics, trade, climate change. The agenda has become a much broader, and now as we host it, you will know that even issues relating to some of the groupings, women, youth, etc., they are now part of the G20 agenda because of its evolution from being a meeting of finance ministers to where it is today. Because naturally, when you bring political leaders at that level, they cannot confine themselves to just discussing finance, economics, and trade. So again, when we are hosting the G20, I want to suggest that there's another crisis in the making, and we may be going through a period again of the evolution of the G20. This crisis is not financial, it's not economic, it's not trade, but it's political, and it's security crisis which is unfolding in Europe, in the Middle East, and in Africa. In Europe, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, which is unfolding. South Africa is involved in efforts to bring the parties to an agreement, but it looks like it's going to be a protracted conflict that requires the world to come together and find a solution. We have another crisis in the Middle East, I don't want to say Palestine-Israel, because it is Israel's onslaught on the Palestinians. Not only in Gaza, let's not forget that in the West Bank, every day there are onslaughts on the Palestinian people. There are forced removals. People are having their homes demolished, and there is an ongoing crisis relating to the security of the Palestinian people generally. So that conflict is going on. On the African continent, you have unending wars, especially in Sudan, where since President al-Bashir's removal from office, Sudan has never known peace. I don't want to say whether I believe al-Bashir should have remained in office or not, but significantly, since his removal, Sudan has been in a constant cycle of war, and there appears to be no end in sight. Again, in Libya, something similar to what is happening in Sudan. In Libya, since the overthrow of the brother leader, as he was called, Libya has not known a thing called peace. There's different groupings claiming authority, and the world appears to be fatigued by the war in Libya and in Sudan, to just move on from it. More focus on Russia, Ukraine, more focus on Gaza. The war in Sudan is forgotten. The conflict in Libya is forgotten as well. So again, as I'm saying, there appears to be a movement towards another reshaping of the G20 from 1997 when it was formed, 2008 when it was reshaped into a leaders forum, and it looks like we are in the making for another reshaping of the G20. But South Africa is not going to be a spectator to that reshaping. As president of the G20 this year, we are undergoing a review. We are taking a look at the G20 since its inception up to now. So one of the things that will be presented at the G20 summit in November is a report looking at how the G20 had evolved over the years and how best we can ensure that it functions and meets its original purpose as a grouping of the world that brings everyone together to agree on what is best for humanity. The G20 is it's a broad family, if I may call it that, because and beyond its members, it has always extended invitations to others. For example, Spain, which is one of the biggest economies in Europe, is not a member of the G20. They've always been invited to G20 meetings. Look at other countries in Asia. Singapore, one of the most important one of the most important countries to the global economy. It's not a member, but it has also always been invited to participate in meetings because the G20 countries acknowledge that beyond them, there are other countries that could play a role towards achieving its own agenda. And also in Scandinavia, Norway is another country that is not a member, but is also being invited. Those countries that I'm mentioning are also invited to participate in our G20 summit, so they will be participating together with other countries. Earlier I did mention that we always view our membership of the G20 as an opportunity to bring African issues to the fore. And so we've invited other African countries. Ethiopia is participating, Angola, Nigeria, and we also have Egypt. So those countries come from different regions of Africa, if you look at the map. So they are representing the totality of the African continent in terms of its regions. But we are working with the African Union Commission as well to ensure that issues on the AU agenda are brought to the G20 in a coordinated manner. So that's how we view our membership. But just lastly, I did say I'll talk about two things. Firstly, the issue of the significance of our membership. But secondly, in terms of preparations for the summit, the previous speaker said it's going to be a diplomatic spectacle, even though we don't really use that word in diplomacy. But we want it to be a well-organized and memorable event for all the participants and especially for South Africans who are the hosts. So the summit will take place on the 22nd and the 23rd of November in Johannesburg. An effort has been made deliberately to ensure that other parts of South Africa feel and are indeed involved in the organizing of this G20 presidency and summit. So today's engagement is part one of those efforts that we are taking to ensure that we involve different stakeholders from different parts of the country. So when the leaders arrive in November, they will be looking at the culmination of work that we've been doing since December last year. And I believe that South Africa stands in a unique position to bring the world together and find common ground. We've always wanted our presidency to be all-inclusive and reconciling all the different elements of the global economy and politics. So we will be looking for an outcome that is based on consensus. It's very difficult to reach under the current global political environment. But I believe that South Africa has unique capacities to bring everyone together. Even during the presidency of Indonesia, of India, of Brazil, South Africa was heavily involved in the negotiating of the leaders' declaration. And our role there was always to find common ground to make sure that we agree on the way forward. Sometimes it's very difficult to find common ground among countries that are not even talking to each other. As you know, some of the G20 countries are not necessarily in the best of terms, but it's for South Africa as the president to bring them together and show them that amidst all the differences, there are some things that we must agree to do together. So that is what we will be attempting to do. Thank you very much for the invitation.
I think we can do better than that. We definitely can do better than that. The Department of International Relations, that's a working encyclopedia, they call it, yeah? Isn't it? Yeah, comprehensive. I didn't see any flipping of papers. I'm just seeing a proper, so when I said he's involved in the planning and the deliberation, you can tell from the inception where our journey has started as well. Let me just make space for it so that I don't actually block you. Mr. Nelson, thank you so much. I'm also looking forward to your keynote address tomorrow, and really I can't wait to actually see it and engage with the youth tomorrow at the University of South Africa as well. So the partnership is continuing, and I'm quite happy that we're able to get a gist of the importance of us. And thank you so much for that. And it's important. I wonder why you have not invited me to your office, because some of the things I'm busy taking notes, and his office is not very far away from me. He's supposed to invite me to the office, so no, there are some new ones that I actually keep on developing. So when I come back to the head office, please, we're having a meeting here and you, Mr. Kwete. It's important. So I want us to get into the meet now. You did indicate that you want to give the opportunity to the panelists who were, prepared in terms of some of the issues, and we were talking about financial inclusion. Some of the issues we want to talk about today. As far as South Africa, it's assuming this is voting presidency, there are certain issues. I've just recently came back from the province of Mpumalanga. We had the G20 tourism ministers meeting just concluded, headed by the Minister for Tourism. Were very successful, and that was happening in the Kruger National Park. So you can imagine just how those 20 economies are exposed to the tourism sector in terms of how far it's going as well. So we'll reflect on that in the next discussions, because I'm quite happy to also welcome people in that space as well, who will also let us know, as far as financial inclusion is concerned, what are we doing in the space of tourism, but also general economy, to make sure that, also talking about the youth and women, how much are we making sure that there are programs, that we don't actually just provide lip service, but also there are tangible programs that we're able to scale up and say how much impact are we making as well. So we are going to move to the panel discussion. So I will invite my guest to come and occupy the space right on my left, starting from this very space chair. I want to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Rashid Tofi, Deputy Director General, Department of Economic Development and Tourism in the Western Cape. Let's give him a hand, please. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. The Western Cape, when was it? Last week, Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, yes, Tuesday, they hosted the inaugural G20 Tourism Investment Summit, which the minister hosted. It was one of the legacy projects that South Africa wants to continue to have, and so don't be surprised next year, within a different province, you are seeing the Tourism Investment Summit as well. So it's one of the legacy for G20. So you'll be happy to hear that, and I want to see you next year, Leanne. I want to take an opportunity to invite you. Leanne Singer, she's an expert in tourism, but very so much involved in this area of tourism. Let's give him a round of applause, please. To to also just give us a brief in terms of some of the work she's been doing in the province, but generally also in the country. Yeah, thank you so much. Some of the work you're doing here in the province and also nationally as well. And really get there for you to join us. And I want to also now invite from the School of Finance, Financial Sciences, the University of South Africa, Ms. Lerato Nkosi. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's give him a round of applause, please. The seat next to Leon there. Mr. Mkhales, I see you just stepped out, but I also just want to use this permission. Surprise on your office behalf. I want to invite Mr. Khoete back, because I know that we'll benefit from. Are we agreeing that we'll benefit if you can participate in the panel discussion, isn't it? Absolutely. Mr. Mohale, I just wanted to say, with your permission, to invite Mr. Khoete back into the podium as well to participate in the panel discussion as far as these important issues are concerned. So thank you so much. Because we're still early, I just wanted to give a round of applause for them to take time from their busy schedule to come and join us this morning. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. We don't take this for granted at all. So I want to start right at the beginning with you, just in terms of, I know that the space of tourism, it's important also for the benefit of our audience to just give a background of the work you do before we get into some of these issues of financial inclusion and some of the issues you have been dealing with recently as well, as far as the issue of tourism business. You can use them on the mic next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to Milan, to our Joburg visitors. It's a privilege for me to join you here today at this G20 gathering in partnership with UNISA and DIRCO, and where I hope we can imagine an economy that's growing not bigger but fairer and more inclusively. From a vantage point of the Western Cape, so would you like me to do a general overview about financial inclusion, or just a little bit of the work that I'm doing?
Just a little bit with the work that you do, just as a start.
No problem.
3 minutes, yes.
So as a start, my day job is to create jobs in the Western Cape economy, which sounds like an enviable task, but not when we met with crisis after crisis that moves us in the opposite direction. So it has been exciting in this last year that I've also been charged with heading up all the coordination of all the G20 meetings happening in the Western Cape. So in the last 9 months, we've hosted 40 G20 meetings, and that included the finance track, trade and investment meetings, tourism, with next end of this month, agriculture, then digital economy, as well as the B20 and other civil society events like the Women's 20 and the Values 20, which is happening next week. So yeah, it's exciting. I think we have to do our best to leverage the world's attention on us this year to showcase what we're doing. I think I totally agree with the statement by one colleague that Africa has the solutions to a lot of our own challenges. So we're not just by 2050 going to be 1/4 of the world's population, but we also could be the source of the solutions to a lot of the global problems. So yes, that's what I've been busy with, and good to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Lien Singh, just your introduction to our audience.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for including me here. I sit here in my capacity as a citizen of the Western Cape and a citizen of our beautiful country. I've been lucky enough to earn my keep in the tourism industry, which I think is one of the best sectors to work in, because we're part of people's stories on a daily basis. And it's a privilege that we in the tourism industry don't take lightly, being part of memories, being part of the moments that people share. I have been employed and run businesses within the tourism sector within the Western Cape. I'm a hospitality consultant across the African continent, driving FDI across different regions in Africa. And I have the fortunate position of being chairperson of the Hospitality Association in the Western Cape. We're called FEDASA, and we're one of the oldest business and lobbying associations in the country across all industries. And then I serve on the board of Cape Town Tourism, where I'm chair of the Tourism and Marketing Committee. and I head up the tourism portfolio sector at the Cape Chamber of Commerce. So all of this sounds like a lot of stuff, but essentially my job is to tell people to visit our beautiful country and to tell people to invest their money in our beautiful country and to make it as easy for people to operate businesses within the tourism industry. The topic at hand today is particularly close to my heart because we have not seen a change in the ownership of the tourism industry in South Africa due to a lack of financial inclusion. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Rose?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Lorato Nkosi from the Department of Economics at Imbizo. I am mainly a senior lecturer in economics where I teach econometrics and various quantitative subjects. I have a PhD in economics and recently I completed my PhD. And it was about the impact of government debt on consumption expenditure, which is also a topic that is centered around financial inclusion and talks to a lot of the crises that have been happening, as our speaker has mentioned. So I also do some consulting for the National Treasury. And yeah, that's my introduction, very brief. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Kwete, I will come back to you later on because you just give us a very comprehensive work that we're doing at G20. I wanted to come back to you, though. And Dr. Nkosi, congratulations once again. And when I see Ms. Nkosi, then I was like, okay, no, we owe you that one. So I want to officially say, Dr. Nkosi, welcome. Thank you very much. Yes. Just in terms of the issues right now, just in terms of tourism, where are we in the Western Cape, but also your observation nationally as well, in terms of financial inclusion, generally the issues that you wanted to mention briefly.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was that we have a growth for jobs strategy in the Western Cape, where we understand the power and the simple idea that small and medium businesses, SMMEs, and in the tourism sector, a large portion of jobs are created by those. These are the people who are the engines for job creation and that keep our economy resilient. So what we are trying, I think there has not been a true transformation in the last 30 years of the ownership structures of the tourism industry at a macro scale, but at a slightly smaller scale, it has been a savior to a lot of people's lives. I think it's almost 10% of the jobs in the Western Cape economy come from the tourism sector. And we have various programs where we try to remove the institutional barriers that help people help people's businesses thrive. So whether that may be reducing the red tape, changing the regulations, we have a diminishing amount of actual investment capital that we're able to provide, but I think there are many institutions nationally where businesses can access SETFA loans. So I don't think there's a shortage of funds, in fact, but there's a shortage of businesses that are investment ready, that are able to package their opportunities for expansion. And I think we're still we're living in an economy where small businesses are sort of survivalist, just live from one day to the next to just kind of enough money to survive rather than thriving and growing. And that does require a bit of a concerted effort. And consultants and businesses like Leanne's businesses, advisors, businesses, organizations on how they can imagine scaling those businesses and then driving in investment. And one of the big projects we have this year is an investment summit. So on the fringes of G20, the Western Cape government is hosting a big investment summit, which is going to be a matchmaking event between investment-ready projects and global funds. And we're quite excited. We've got about 100 projects already on our, what we're calling a deal book, and we're now attracting investors to match those investable projects. Thank you.
I think we'll definitely talk about that. Say then, how do we then start with that expansion, so what is needed as well. We'll come back to that important point, because we don't want businesses to really want us to survive and cover just the bare minimum. How do we then move it to another level as well? I think that's quite significant. And then is there recognition to make sure that women, youth, deliberately have focused programs, and those businesses, how do they actually grow? Because startups has to move to an established business as well, and that needs to happen. We'll turn to the difficulties and then the technicalities as well, and the business of knowing how. And I've heard at the summit also the matchmaking. That's where the growth happens as well, because you cannot actually grow alone as well. Ms. Inga, in terms of you did talk about the transformation. So, the transformation is lagging behind, the issue of ownership. You want to expand on that?
Sure. I wanted to say, apologies. I was at the summit last week, and it really was a commitment from Minister de Lille's, a very public statement that she is always putting tourism at the forefront. I'm going to answer your question in a second. As we sit here, there is a very big conference taking place in Sun City. It's starting tomorrow. It's the Tourism Business Council of South Africa's annual conference. Now, what the Tourism Business Council's role is associations like FedHasa, but then all the other business tourism associations, whether you are a SATA, which represents travel agencies, or whether you are SACI, who represents the meetings and events industries. There's an agriculture tourism industry, there's a wine tourism industry association. All of these associations report into, we are part of the Tourism Business Council, and the Tourism Business Council is our hotline to the National Department of Tourism. So that conference is taking place, and this really is an opportunity where the public sector gets to sit directly with the private sector and engage. And we appreciate opportunities like today because I'm sitting here representing businesses operating in the Western Cape industry. And as Dr. Tokyo pointed out, in the Western Cape, we've identified tourism as one of our biggest economic drivers. But for me, it's a lot more personal. We believe that job creation in the tourism industry is the easiest way for us to turn our economy around and save our economy. There are different stats that float around, but for every 11 international visitors, some people say 12, that arrive in South Africa, one permanent job is created, right? And the tourism supply chain is very far and very wide. And it is an industry where we have very easy access to entry, right? If we look at an event like today, which represents events in the tourism industry, this is a business meeting, but it is part of the tourism industry, right? So we have the cameramen around, we have AV, we have the caterers outside, we have the transport that brought us here this morning. So the supply chain is really very, very wide, and therefore we believe that there has to be a focus on job creation in the tourism industry. And in the Western Cape, our colleagues sitting in the city of Cape Town, in the mayor's office, they will tell you that their vision is to, within 5 years, have one tourism job in every single household, right? Now, to talk about the transformation of the industry, yes, there has been a huge massive amount of growth within the SME sector of the tourism industry. But if we look at the ownership of tourism assets, and we're talking about cultural centers, we're talking about restaurants, we're talking about hotels, we're talking about resorts, there has not been a huge shift in the ownership of those businesses to the hands of particularly women, people, vulnerable people, and particularly black business ownership. And there, I think government and the private sector has to take a long hard look at itself and say, how are we going to actually change this? Because that's where the generational wealth will come from, when an asset is handed over from one generation to the next.
Also, that's quite important. I also want to say, as far as we're looking at the already established businesses, huge. I mean, Western Cape, really, in terms of tourism numbers, we know in terms of how much it brings as well. So the issue is on the new entrants now into the and that transformation is about new entrants, new role players. Instead of already established business, they obviously need to grow and survive. It's okay, they're already established, but the new entrants now accessing to finance so that they can grow as well, because I think that aspect is quite important, so that they're able to grow as well. We'll get into that when it come to your topic. Because in terms of in the academic space, these some of the things that in the research that you do on a daily basis, the students are doing all this research in terms of how do you then make new industries and grow the economy. What's some of the observations?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start by explaining what economic development means, and I will link it to what the previous colleagues have also said. So economic development is about the transformation from low-income economies to your more modern industrial economies, where the main drivers of that are your SMEs or your small businesses or even businesses by individuals. And those businesses usually need to be driven by certain policy spaces. And the policy space which exists now that we're talking about is financial inclusion. And so this financial inclusion not only encompasses your businesses, maybe in tourism or other sectors, but also your rural and urban linkages, for example. And the policy space that I'm talking about and the custodians of those policies include mostly the National Treasury and the FSCA. So those are the more important institutions which are involved. Financial inclusion is not only about creating access to your underserved communities or your grassroots communities, but it is also about making sure that your underserved communities have access, usage, and quality of any financial service or product. And then what I mean by that, when I talk about usage, let's take the example of a banking app. So a banking app should be easy for anyone to use. Now we're talking about your grassroots economy. So a banking app should be easy to use, should be cashless, should have a good interface, and should be a very easy thing to use. So those are some of the elements of financial inclusion that we're talking about. Also, when it comes to financial inclusion, a very important solution to financial inclusion is what we call agency banking. So with agency banking, that is when a bank bestows powers to a non-bank institution to take over not take over its operations, but to provide its services. I'll give an example with Capitec, which is doing quite well in terms of financial inclusion, because you find that most of its clients or its customer base are able to withdraw money from a non-bank institution. They're able to withdraw money from their account from Pick n Pay, ShopRite, and the like. You look like you don't believe me, Chair.
No. It's my excitement, because I'm just coming from Mpumalanga. We're talking about something that I've observed.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just thinking, it's just a tick moment for me to say, absolutely. So when I give you a funny face, it's a tick.
We're all learning here, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And then if we look at Africa, because our speaker has also told us, our speaker and the colleague spoke about the fact that G20 is not only about South Africa, but about Africa as well, and trying to push the African agenda. If you look at another banking app called Imbizo, which was launched in Kenya, it's doing quite well all over the African continent, even though we don't really have the uptake here in South Africa. So some of its features are that you are able to transfer about 70,000 rand per day on the mobile app. It doesn't have any bureaucratic requirements like your ID, things like that. And then also it's easy to use. It's easy to use, like I was talking about usage. So back to the concept of agency banking. You could even use these grassroots economy businesses to participate in agency banking. So like I was using the example of Capitec as the example of Capitec, You can also use these non-bank institutions or non-bank entities to pursue whatever services that people would have needed to travel for. So in the academic space, that's mostly what we're talking about. And if you talk about data for South Africa, when it comes to financial inclusion, it's a bit hard to get. But in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa is doing well. It's actually the best when it comes to financial inclusion, because we've got a financial inclusion of 89%. And then in Kenya, it's the second one at 78%.
Thank you very much. That's my facial expression now. Because you're spitting facts. So we really appreciate it. We'll have an opportunity for questions and inputs, because I saw we all are consumers of tourism products in different levels, also where we are staying now. Can comment about the establishment. I mean, when I was in Mpumalanga, it's like, oh, I want to buy this, home traditionally made material. They're like, oh, no cash, don't worry, tap here. So that was my expression, all right? I was like, oh yeah. I couldn't, obviously, in the academic sense, you needed to find an academic way of categorizing it. So I'm really impressed that you actually have molded. Mr. Kwete, we also have an opportunity for questions. So after Mr. Kwete making posts, I'm going to come to you, because there's some issues that I wanted to raise before I take the questions. In terms of Minister of Foreign Affairs, like Minister Lamola, when he goes out and sign all these important MOUs and trade agreements and bilateral agreements as well, tourism does form part of it as well, where countries make commitment to say they're going to work on visa regimes, they're going to work on a number of issues to allow people to come in and to come in as well, also to establishing businesses. Your observation, comment also on what has been said so far? Yeah, I'm going to speak.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say, in the G20, the issue of financial inclusion is premised on the understanding that inequality is rising across the world. When you look at some of the developing countries that are in the G20, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, India, those are some of the most unequal societies or economies in the whole world, where the rich people, very rich, the poor, extremely poor. So the gap between the two is widening. So the issue of inclusion is based on that realization that the gap between the rich and the poor is growing. There's nothing with the rich people getting richer, but there is absolutely a problem with poor people getting poorer, because you are disenfranchising a large portion of the global population. So that is where the issue is. That is the problem that the G20 is trying to resolve. Now, the issue of inclusion, financial inclusion, in South Africa, for example, you look at some of the factors that are contributing to financial exclusion. Most of the time, people would say there is a sector of the economy that is operating above the law. But my own argument is that that sector, that informal sector, is actually operating beneath the law, not above the law. If it was above the law, it would have an authority over the state. But it doesn't have an authority over the state. It is a sector that is crying out for recognition and formalization, but it also cries out for regulation. I know that regulation is something that actually drives some of the players in the informal sector to go deeper into the informal sector. Because the more you give them recognition, you regulate them, they get out of the system and operate underground, because they don't want taxation, for example, which comes with recognition and regulation. So those factors are contributing to this issue of financial exclusion. Some of them are natural, not natural, but organic. It happens organically that some of the sectors of our economy are not, don't have access to finance, don't have access to capital, because they are operating in that sector of the economy that I'm saying is operating beneath the law, because it is not recognized, but some of the players in that sector are operating beneath the law deliberately in order to avoid regulation and taxation. But they are a minority. Those are the opportunists. They are a minority. The large majority of the informal sector is crying out for regulation and recognition, which will then provide an opportunity for financial inclusion. Because you can't have access to finance if you are a faceless person or institution. Because the people who are providing you finance want certainty that they will get their money back. If I'm lending you money and you're operating underground, how am I going to get my money back? So when you provide regulation, some of those players that I say are in the minority then go deeper underground, because that is where there is no room. It is the survival of the fittest. But I just want to say, in the G20, we're not looking into this issue, in a small detail as it pertains to South Africa, but we're looking at it broadly, because most of the world is also recognizing the issue that there is capital that we're not using and which we could be using to propel the global economy. And that capital that is undervalued is in that sector of the economy that is not being given recognition. So that is where we are looking at it at a macro level. But of course, some of the countries are very quick to remind each other that we are a sovereign state. We regulate our own affairs following our own laws. We're not going to sign up to a system of government that takes away our sovereignty. That is mostly the argument when we talk about how to regulate the financial sector broadly. The issue of sovereignty is then raised to say, I'm an independent country with my own laws. You can't run my country, whereas I have my own way of designing my form of government and how it should regulate the finances.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Respect. Didi, I want to come to you. I think it's important that it's obvious that you can't grow if you're not part of the ecosystem, and being in an environment where it's regulated as well. But I want to just see from hands in terms of inputs and questions. I will just start by maybe 4 at 1. I'll start here, and then I'll go right in the front with the second one. We'll take those 2 inputs for now. Before we take this one, the second and first, I want to talk about Western Cape. In terms of tourism, GDG, sometimes they say don't fix it when it's not broken, because they say Western Cape in terms of the Cape Town specifically, in terms of events, top notch, high level. Then how do we then make sure that not only Cape Town and other areas, even within our surrounding areas, are also benefiting as well, and also the part of the ecosystem as well. And I think this is what was some of the issues you're grappling with. As you host these big events, the deliberate attempt to make sure that all the role players play a part and are part of the ecosystem.
We set ourselves quite audacious goals, so we don't see the fact that we're doing well and being let's say the best performing province in the Western Cape as something to rest on. Absolutely, because I think it's the spread of tourism across the province that's quite key. So maybe I'll just pick up on a couple of things that people have said. I mean, I see tourism more not as a sector, but as a total economy, as you said, Leanne, because it includes the property industry, the logistics industry, the transport industry. So it's very far-reaching, and I think it's the ownership in those larger businesses is what we're trying to drive. One of the projects and things we've done is we have a tourism product development fund, which we focused on businesses in the regions, in the 30 municipalities that would like to get into the tourism business, but tourists, it's an experiential economy that we're in. So you can't just say, well, tourists should come to George or they should come to Kanaland or something if you don't have the right product development. And so we had a fund that was made available where small businesses, and we focused on women, youth, and black businesses, could put together proposals and we would fund those. We also work very closely with other hubs. So we use intermediary organizations. One of them is called WOM Hub here in Cape Town, where we give them one portion of money and they unlock other funding to support women entrepreneurs. And not just in tourism, in other industries, as you said, it's wider than that. We're also doing an amazing collaboration in the digital economy space called the Timbuktu program. It's Africa-wide and it's with the UNDP, where we're supporting businesses getting into the digital space. I'm going to tell you one more. We understand that the capital that exists in the country and how do you unlock that. So we have a partnership with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where they asked us to identify 100 businesses that are ready to scale. Now, as government, it's quite tricky to fund a startup because the failure rate of startups inherently is quite high. That's what it should be in entrepreneurship. You should start something, if it's not working, it fails and you should start something else. So we tend to help scale-ups. So in the JSE program, we looked at businesses that are running for 3 years, but now need 10 million rand, might need 5 million rand, and it was an amazing program. We managed to unlock JSE capital into businesses in the Western Cape, and many organizations have got funded through that program. So we're doing those types of programs. I do think that regulation and formalization is a double-edged sword. I don't think it's at the same time that we want things to be regulated, we can't say we want to be regulated and formalized, but then not appreciate that the informal economy, the township economy is such a huge employer and we shouldn't over-regulate. We actually at the same time are trying to reduce regulation, trading, permit requirements and things like that so that you allow business to flow a little bit. So we must accept that we are in Africa, we're in an economy where the informal economy is going to play a key role, and we should embrace it, because I don't think every person is going to enter the formal economy, not in our lifetime. I think the informal economy is going to be the future. With AI coming, more and more people, I think, are going to have employment opportunities which are quite informal, and we should embrace that and not over-regulate it. So that's my view. Thanks.
Can I please?
No, you may.
Dr. Jeff, it was interesting what you said about the JSE funding, because that is an example of public-private partnerships, and we know that is why I'm certainly sitting here, and we can't rely on government, and there has to be a cooperation between government creating a landscape where we can operate as efficiently and optimally as possible, and for government to keep us safe and provide basic services, and then, as we said, just the right amount of regulation. But how do we harness these public-private partnerships? One of the things that came to the front at the conference last week was lots of discussions around public-private partnerships. And I want to give you two examples. Amongst the tourism bodies in the Western Cape, we have started the first public-private partnership for a destination marketing company. So we have branded the Garden Route. It's a partnership between some of the businesses in the region, the municipalities. Westgrow are one of our partners, and jointly we are creating a brand, and we are going out into the marketplace, and this is funded, a little bit of government money, a little bit from the municipalities, mostly from the private sector. We all sit on the board, and we are piloting this to see, well, how can this optimally be marketed and then put a destination on the map. The second opportunity that's available is our both national departments, the national government, and the municipalities and provinces are sitting on a huge amount of assets, properties, buildings, resorts, municipal campsites that are firstly not optimally run, because that's not government business. Government's business is not to be a hotelier or a hospitality specialist. But these assets need to be released into the private sector. Public-private partnerships need to be signed so that these can be better run, it can be more, and then the state coffers, they can turn into landlords rather than currently trying to run these assets and they're non-functional. And here I believe there has been massive change, because we spoke about the transformation of the tourism industry. This is the best way for us to transform. These, if you just look at some of the beautiful assets that we have in the Western Cape, the most beautiful campsites, right? And yes, some of it is run by Sandbox as an example, but there are many that are still in the hands of the municipalities. I remember once visiting a resort in the Free State, most incredible resorts, but that were empty, that were not marketed optimally, that were not properly run, where there's just beautiful assets that we're sitting on. So this needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency in my books.
Dr. Nkosi?
Any input so far? Before I open the floor.
You can open the floor.
Nelson?
Yes. Just before we open the floor, I just want to say, I mean, at the macro level, at the G20 level, because as we want to insist on the G20 reference, given our presidency this year, we as South Africa, we do recognize that there are complementarities between us and some of the G20 countries, but we mustn't forget that there's also competition amongst the G20 countries for certain things. For example, in the Western Cape, the colleagues talk about wine, citrus industries. When you look at some of the G20 countries, France is one of our biggest competitors when it comes to wines. When you look at Spain, I did say they're not a member of the G20, but they are participating in the G20 almost on a full-time basis. One of our biggest competitors when it comes to the citrus sector. So there are complementarities, but there is a certain level of competition that we must acknowledge. But nature has designed itself in such a way that because there are different seasons, when it's our winter, it's summer that side, so sometimes even that competition is overpowered by the force of nature, and we have to trade amongst each other because of the seasonal nature that some of these products they tend to take. So South Africa is mostly concerned with not so much managing our own competition with these countries through the G20, but on ensuring that the G20 agrees on a level playing field for everyone without substituting existing structures and institutions such as the World Trade Organizations, such as the United Nations itself. The G20 is a multilateral institution, but it doesn't substitute other institutions that we've been using, as I said, the World Trade Organization and the UN itself. In fact, the G20 is but a portion of the membership of the UN, and there is recognition that some of the issues that are on the agenda of the G20 must supplement what the UN is already trying to do. For example, with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals, some of the agenda items that are on the G20, some of the countries, of course, try when they don't get their way in other forums, then they bring it to the G20 because it's a smaller grouping, and then they try to do shortcuts. But South Africa insists that the G20 must supplement the work that the UN is doing on a variety of issues, but broadly looking at the issue of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Complementarity all around with different platforms. Dr. Nkosi?
I just want to add that as much as we're talking about tourism today, and we're talking about the G20, and we're talking about those aspects in terms of financial inclusion, we must not neglect to mention an important stakeholder or actor in this whole financial inclusion topic is the banking sector. So the banking sector is important because it has those financial services and products where I'm not only talking about banking apps, but products such as insurance, access to credit, which they can give grassroots economies to engage in innovation, to push forward their businesses. So the banking industry really has an important lever in making sure that we have financial inclusion. So I think they should not be neglected. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks so much, Doc. I'll come to you. Just introduce yourself to our panelists and audience, please, before
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, panelists. My name is Tanya Lina. I'm from the FW de Klerk Foundation. I'm an intern. Thank you guys for being here. It's really enlightening and everything. I wanted to talk about, if we're talking about financial inclusion and tourism, specifically for our colleagues here in the Department of Tourism, what are you guys doing to necessarily kind of bridge the gap between tourism? Cape Town is now deemed, the best country globally, and we have an influx of tourists coming, and of course because it's beautiful. But how are you bridging the gap between the housing issue? Because I feel as though, in as much as there's an influx of tourists coming in, and foreign investment, I guess, into Cape Town, there's a huge housing issue that then kind of creates a huge gap for the citizens of South Africa. A lot of South Africans are being moved out into the outskirts of Cape Town and are not able to basically afford living close to the city because there's huge businesses, property businesses buying out the buildings. I guess a huge wave of gentrification that is happening. And also not to mention with the foreign investment, prices are going up, so people's standard of living is also, going down. So I just wanted to ask, how is the Department of Tourism dealing with those challenges, and how is the government, and I guess Jericho, also taxing foreigners so that South Africans can also, have a chance and sustain their standard of living? Thank you.
You want to reply to that, because there's a question on.
Do you want to take both questions or not?
No, I just want to review, because just two for now. What is still fresh? And did you say Cape Town country? I just want to double check. You mean South Africa, or you mean, because we must just make the clarity before we proceed, so that also UNISA, the reference must happen. That if we go to another UNISA, then.
No, sorry, I meant Cape Town, the city.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
Do you want? I'll respond out to you.
Yes, please. So firstly, I'd like to say it's so lovely knowing that the FW de Klerk Association or Foundation is here, because they recently invited us to the beautiful building in the city, and they invited tourism stakeholders to engage. They said we do have a voice, and clearly they have a voice. So thank you very much. They said they do have a voice, and what role can the FW de Klerk Foundation play in facilitating dialogue within government for the tourism sector? So it's so lovely to see that they're putting their money where their mouth is. On the point of the increase in property values, yes, this is happening, right? We've done a really good job of becoming a world-class city and a world-class destination. We, as the hospitality sector, as the private sector, if I run a hotel, right, the taxes, the zoning, the legislation that regulates how I run my business, the insurances, the banking fees, everything is different if I run a formal hotel versus to running a short-term let or Airbnb as an example. But we do want everybody to exist, because what has Airbnb done? It has created thousands of jobs. Right, it has created thousands of jobs across it. It has allowed people access to running a business and using an asset that they have to now generate an additional income. So the issue of regulation, too much regulation, too little regulation. So we as the hospitality sector is asking for transparency and legislation that ensures an equal playing field where everybody can operate in. That said, the fact that our city is performing well, the fact that we're such great people, we've got such beautiful natural assets, people are coming and they are spending more money. We are trying to do two things from the hospitality sector, from the tourism sector. We are consciously trying to tell our tour operators and our international partners who are bringing visitors into our country to look at different itineraries. So don't, instead of spending 5 days in Cape Town, spend 3 days in Cape Town, go to the garden route and perhaps go to the West Coast, so that we spread the love, and then there's a spread of where our tourists are visiting, so that those other regions can benefit. That's the one thing that we're doing. So we're having discussions with the tour operators, with the DMOs to change the itineraries. Then we're having discussions with the city, with the Western Cape government, to ensure that a lot of the assets that they're sitting on in the city and with close to the city, that this is unlocked to counter the accommodation crisis and the housing crisis. just still around us, yes, we see the hotels in Long Street or Bree Street coming up, but right next door you'll see a building that belongs to perhaps the Western Cape government or the City of Cape Town or national government that can be unlocked, that's standing empty or that's sitting on a vacancy rate of 80%, right, that can be turned into affordable housing. So it's a very hard problem to tackle. There's no straightforward answer to it, but I can assure you this has happened across many countries, many cities in the world, and I'm sure the economists will have a lot to say about this, much more than me. But we have constant dialogue and we are aware of it, and there is going to be regulation from the National Department of Tourism soon, ensuring that the short-term letting and the informal accommodation sector is going to be regulated a bit more.
Yes, please.
Is it Tamdu Malinga?
Yes.
You unfortunately, we don't control SARS as the Western Cape government. I can't speak on how and whether we should tax foreign owners. My wife would love your view because we're sitting on a lovely house whose rates have just doubled, and it took us 50 years to get to that place where we could own a nice house. It is a global phenomenon. I remember we lived in Amsterdam in the early 90s, and we lived in Amsterdam city centre, and all our friends there now say they can't afford a house in Amsterdam because it's just a tourist city. So it is a global phenomenon. I'm not saying it's okay, but as we grow and become part of the sort of global community, that's what prices do in Mumbai and New York, and they kind of surge. I hope that, I think that we're still almost a boutique town, country. We're nowhere near over tourism, so this is going to keep happening. But as more people come and invest here, I think there's an upside to the fact that people who come here either to invest, to live, to retire, actually bring economic growth. And I think there's still, Western Cape has a 19% unemployment rate compared to the rest of the country, notwithstanding in-migration, notwithstanding the increased investment. And it's because for every one person who buys a house, as you know, you probably directly employ 3 or 4 people, but also if they just do a little 1 million rand upgrade to their house, it might put food on the table for 10 people. So it once again, I think it has a positive impact, and it's not such a bad thing that we're starting to see housing development and a spread of housing, people moving to George and other nodes, Stellenbosch, George, the West Coast, becoming places that now people are, yes, they're leaving City of Cape Town because they want a cheaper place to live, but it's starting to spread Cape Town's economic activity into the rest of the Western Cape. That's my view. Thank you.
All right. Obviously, we want to get the inputs from different sectors as well, the youth, civil society and business as well, and women. So I'm going to you in the front, but any input on the floor? Okay, I will take 2 of you. That the one who's matching my scarf, and then I'll move to you. Yes, and I'll move right at the back. Yeah, so we'll start with you. I'll take all 4 at once so that we can actually just take 4 at once, and then our panelists will take some of your questions here.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Nombondo Kumalo, the Western Cape SRC Chairperson for UNISA. I've got a series of questions for all the panelists that are sitting there, and I will unpack them, and whichever is relevant, then you can be able to respond. My first question, we're still talking about the financial exclusion and access to banking. What are the main reasons why township and rural communities in the Western Cape region remains excluded from the mainstream banking services? How so? Are these bank apps and mobile financial services designed with the digital literacy and language needs of undeserved community in mind? And I'm going to pose another question in the same breath. And what accountability mechanisms exist to ensure that the financial institutions do not discriminate against Black-owned tourism startups? And I'm going to go into the tourism development and inclusive of growth. How can the Western Cape region ensure that community-based tourism and informal tourism operators are integrated into formal tourism economy. How can the tourism be used as a vehicle for financial inclusion, especially for women, the youth, and people with disabilities? Excuse me. And why do we find that so many tourism SMEs in the Western Cape struggle to access startup capital, even when they have viable business models?
Okay.
Just two more. And then it's for all the panelists, so it's not directed to one person, but we can unpack it. And the other question, the most important one, is how can the government reduce the red tape and compliance costs that disappropriately affects small tourism businesses? Because that's the reality of our SMEs that are currently facing the Western Cape. And going to the G20 and the financial agenda, what role can the Western Cape, and I'm focusing on the Western Cape because it's a tourism leading destination in South Africa, and we understand the type of input it has on the current GDP of tourism in the sector. So what role can the Western Cape play in piloting inclusive tourism finance models that can be scaled across the continent? Thank you very much, Chair.
All right. I've noted all of them, but I think there's a consensus, and I know that Mr. Moro, you agree with me. There's some of the parallels as far as financial inclusion, but there's a bulk of finance as well. So I've noted them all down, and I know they will address that. But I want to take other four, and then we'll deal. So we'll be spoiled for choice in terms of then how do you break it down and some of the things, because I know you've already spoken on finance and financial institution as well, the inclusion part. So I think we'll get into that.
I'm going to...
My team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Onalena Clementine Mokoto, simply Clemi. I'm from Gauteng. I'm representing Gauteng and Northwest. I received the invitation from UNISA. I'm also the Chief Executive Officer of Imbizo Holdings, which is a mining industry. I've got a plenty of questions, but I'm only asked only two questions to our panelists, especially with regards to the local economy, because the local community is one of the things that I'm bringing back to the community. My question, just not to waste a lot of time, how can we ensure that financial inclusion initiatives are tailored to the specific needs of local communities rather than being one-size-fits-all solutions? And my second question is, how can we improve financial literacy and capabilities amongst grassroots communities, and what role can education play in promoting financial inclusion? I thank you.
Thank you very much. Ministry.
Thank you so much. My name is Lionel Blooms. I'm from an organization called EduNova, so it's a non-profit organization. And I'm also here received an invitation from UNISA, so it seems like we were meant to sit together. First and foremost, I just want to extend a hearty thank you. I think this is a very important conversation to have, and I think you've selected the right individuals to be and to represent as well. I think one thing that stood out to me, it's the part of financial inclusion, and coming from and working in the education sector. I think when I think about financial inclusion, one thing that stands out for me is financial literacy. And coming from an invitation of UNISA, I think it's also quite important to just understand what local government is doing to ensure that these local-owned tourism organizations, how are they being capacitated to really leverage their type of financial intelligence to ensure that they keep up with regulations, with SARS, and also to ensure that they can continue to build and also to scale that as well. And when I'm thinking about tourism and in the context of Western Cape, I think it's more than just the garden route or just the beach lines and the coastlines, because I think coming from working in the more marginalized context within the Western Cape, areas like Khayelitsha, Gugulethu and places like that, I think there's also some rich cultural aspects to pull upon, and how are we capacitating those individuals to really leverage that type of wealth of culture and experience. And I think that's also something that tourists would love to come see. I think, yeah, I cannot stress that enough, that it's not just about the beach lines, but to really see the wealth and culture and history of the citizens of South Africa. Thank you.
Increasing our tourism package and offering as well. It's quite important. We're right at the back. I saw her hand. She left. She just stepped up. Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll come at the front.
I'll tackle.
You spoke for choice.
Yeah, we got a few, and I'll try and tackle the ones I can. And I was SRC Vice President in 1994 at UCT, so it's a nice memory. That's where I met Madiba for the first time, when him and FW came to campus to do promotions of the elections. It was quite cool. There's an organization called ASISA, it's the association where all the banking insurance companies get together, and they have a huge financial literacy program. It literally, I think they spend 20 or 30 million rand. If you're not aware of it, anybody, they do this at universities, TVET colleges, they do it with farm workers, small businesses. So ASISA is the association for all the Sanlam, Old Mutual banks. They all are part of that. They put their financial literacy money in there, and then they drive those programs. We play a big role in, this is to some of your questions that I'm just going to pick up on, in reducing red tape. We have both a reactive program. We get about 500 calls a year with a call center with a 90% resolution rate on anyone that has a red tape reduction issue. And if we then, of course, hear many calls of the same issue, we go in and we get our team going to make a systemic change to that. So anything from, like, I'm trying to export my rooibos tea, or I'm trying to get the regulation to I remember getting a call from the Olympia Cafe saying the city of Cape Town is closing them down for their health and safety certificate. Can we step in? And we find out, you don't have your health and safety certificate. It's not always going to be in your favor. But we then inquire. So the red tape reduction unit is a bit of what we do to reduce red tape. I agree with you. There is red tape. I think red tape affects all businesses, but I don't think small businesses have the time and the money and the energy to have a lawyer in their company who can deal with the red tape. I do think big businesses also have red tape, but they employ professional people who go in and know how to fix those. And so we try to do that free as a service. Interestingly, you're all talking about financial literacy. The Office of the Consumer Protector reports directly to me, and it's a program that we fund that does financial literacy across all the 30 units. So we literally, last year we did financial literacy programs in every one of our 30 municipalities. But on Alina, we're trying to digitize that. And to you from EduNova, I'd love to speak to you afterwards. I'll give you my card. We do it with at a very grassroots level. I personally don't think people who are already in the tourism business have a lack of access to banking. I mean, even someone who's stands outside here, as you said, selling a little trinket, they already have like a Yoko machine or whatever that thing is. I don't think that's the problem, personally, but our financial literacy program goes into financial education, how to deal with SARS, how to do those things, and we do it through industrial theatre, very hands-on things on farms, because government tends to step in where the private sector can't do it, right? So no use me spending your taxpayer money on universities when ASISA is doing that, or on how to get a bank account when the private sector is doing that already, and you really, doesn't matter what phone you have, you can access online banking. I mean, frankly, I don't think we must overplay that. Personally, the doctor here might disagree, but we try to fill the gaps. And our financial literacy programs, I think they could be more digitized, Lionel, and I'd love to speak to you about that. You also asked the question about leveraging our culture. Now, not all tourism groups, we've always, since I've been in tourism for the last 20 years, I've tried to get people to go on a township tour, go into communities. But at the same time, I mean, I come from a township, and as soon as I could afford to move out of the township, I moved out of the township. So I don't want to always bring all the tourists to my township to drive around, look out the window. I want to own a proper part of the tourism industry. I want to own a hotel And so what I've been doing with the G20, remember I told you we have 40 G20 meetings, we've been making sure that cultural products are available, sold at the G20 meetings so that people in the CTICC, at the hotels, get access to those products because they may or may not be able to go to those cultural places. We also have made sure that the artists who perform are earning proper money, like 20, 30,000 rand to perform a couple of songs at a G20 meeting. That's potentially more impactful to their lives, more respectful to their lives than trying to put the G20 tourists on the bus and showing them the township. But that might be a controversial statement to make. I'm not saying we mustn't include townships and people's local communities in the tourism itineraries, but we're also trying to change some of the mindsets. So those are my views on some of the questions asked. Thank you.
Just to note that we have about 7 minutes to conclude it before I hand over to another part of the program. Yes.
In terms of the ensuring that visitors get to see everything, right, the true experience. So today's visitor wants an authentic experience. They don't want whitewashing, but we also don't want to have the issue like we have in the Boer Kaap, where people are living in these homes and you have tourists walking up and down looking at these beautiful painted houses, walking, taking photos. As a city and as Cape Town Tourism, we've had massive issues with the residents wanting to feel respected. We're not spectacles, we're not here for Instagram, this is where we live. So it's the balance between that. But we're really lucky in the ecosystem that we operate in the Western Cape because we really have such an open relationship between the private sector and the public sector, whether it's on a national government level or provincial government of the city. We communicate on this, and issues that are raised get addressed immediately. And this is so important where the associations come in. Now, to touch on financial literacy, to touch on inclusion and access to finance and how do we make startup businesses part of it, I want to encourage you to, when you go out there and talk to young people, talk to your students, talk to new businesses, choose an association that you become part of, right? Because the association is there to represent your voice. The fees are nominal, guys. To become a FedHasa member as a under 35 is for free. And we launched it in Youth Month. We said membership to the Hospitality Association is free, right? Yes, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You have to be nominated. You have to write us a motivation because you've got to take stuff seriously. People don't always value things that come for free. But when you're part of an association, you have a voice, and then you are able to sit at the table, get invited to events like this. Last night, our communique went out to all our members to be here today. You will only know about the opportunities that are available, and very often the funding opportunities when you are, whether you're in the mining sector or whether you're in tourism or banking, there is an association where you can become a member of and then be part of the dialogue.
Thank you, Chair. I think my colleagues have also handled a lot of the questions, but I'll talk about the question that I heard about is there financial exclusion against black startups? So although it might be difficult to implement or to think about it, but there are policies of BBBE that ensure that whichever business applies for a startup should have BBBE status, and that is one of the gateways into financial inclusion. However, I must mention that with that comes the challenge of fronting, where you have other businesses posing as as others in order to gain that entry. And then I like to use Capitec as an example because it's doing quite well. We spoke about, back to your question about black startups. Some of the things that black startups need include funding, right? Capital to start their businesses. Now, Capitec has a loan that can be approved immediately using your banking app. So you don't have to go to the bank, sit down, sign whatever documents or even sign electronically. They give you approval just based on your profile and how your account is really performing. So if you are a black business and you would like to have your own startup, no matter how small, no matter how relatively big, as long as it's within what we've been classifying as SMMEs, then that's an avenue that you could take that does not include, for instance, finding out information about such events, because there's information asymmetry out there. There's a problem where information is not clearly or efficiently shared amongst society. So that's just one avenue. And then I'd like to point you to the FSCA's strategic policy for 2025 to 2028. So it has a lot more meat when it comes to what I'm talking about when I talk about the policies. And then also you can refer to the National Treasury's pillars, 3 pillars of financial inclusion. So that's why even in the beginning I spoke about the fact that in the policy space, the most important stakeholders are the Treasury and the Financial Services Conduct Authority. Thank you.
Mr. Quet?
Thank you. I'm glad that most of the questions were not directed to me. But there is one, I think Mfundo asked the question about what role the Western Cape is playing to pilot inclusive tourism markets, which can be replicated across the continent. I think tourism follows a number of things. A certain number of basic things must be in place for tourism to operate. Firstly, when you look at the African continent, the first thing that will affect tourism is transportation, access to markets and access to the places that you want to market as tourist facilities. So if tourists cannot get there, then that is the first indication that we are not winning. So transportation across borders by different modes, air and land and sea on the continent is still a factor. There are challenges with regard to air transportation moving across the continent. Sometimes you have to go to East Africa in order to get to West Africa. You fly to Addis, you stop over in Cameroon to get to the third country. That is not conducive for tourism. Secondly is the issue of safety. Tourists will not go to a place that is unsafe. The prevalence of conflicts is affecting Africa's tourism market very negatively. So we cannot capitalize on some of our tourist assets because they are located in places that are unsafe. And then the other thing is access to health. Tourists will not go to a place where if they fall ill, they will not have medical attention, competent medical attention. So those basic things, if we can get them right on the continent, then tourists will follow. So it's just the question of getting the basics right. There are attempts that are being made to regulate connectivity across the continent. Some of our countries are entering into visa-free agreements to ensure that tourists do not have to go through different processes of visa applications to get from one place to another. So if a person from Europe lands in South Africa, they can have access to Eswatini, to Lesotho, to Botswana without having to apply for visas at all of those 4 or 5 embassies in their own country. So that integration of our systems of immigration is necessary and it's underway. And then the issue of integrating our economies through the African Continental Free Trade Area is already working. South Africa and a number of countries have already started trading under that agreement. So there is some way that we are going in terms of integration of our systems, transport, logistics, security, but also our economies. But it's not going to, there's not going to be a quick fix solution to some of these issues that are preventing tourism from reaching its potential on the continent. It's going to take years.
We've got our work cut out. Just before listening to Tankosi, any inputs as far as anything that came out you might want to make input on? If you don't have, it's fine, because I want to also give an opportunity that when this meeting ends, there will be also engagement outside during lunch as well as we conclude, just because of time. But if you want to make any input, as you started us.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that our panelists really are addressing some of the matters that different stakeholders that are here are really having a concern of course, even in the opening speech, the welcome speech, that what is it that the G20 is going to bring to us? And of course, in terms of also making sure that there's a real transformation financially. So these are the issues that really, where I'm sitting, I'm hearing them, the colleagues addressing them. And of course, the other question, of course, is going to be for our own communities, our people, to say, post G20, what is it that we as a country would want to see, especially in making sure that our people really benefit out of this major event. There's going to be about 19 other countries that will be with us. And then what is it that for an ordinary person on the ground, because every day they hear about the G20, but how do we make it the G20 meaningful to our own communities? And I'm hearing the panelists also trying to grapple and get to the bottom of this. And I'm just hoping that going to Sandton on those 2 days, the Soweto people will really have a sense to say that this is what we will be getting out of the G20. And of course, I'm happy that the panelists also addressing a number of engagements that are taking place to ensure that there's that awareness, but also making sure that our communities are also participating so that they can derive a meaning out of the whole exercise that is taking place. But of course, we are saying, people, the time is now up for us not ever to think of manna coming from heaven, but to participate, making sure that also our inputs, because even ordinary people have got ideas to can contribute. So I'm glad that the issues that are coming out are really addressing this. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Dr. Nkosi, you wanted to know?
I just wanted to add on the issue of black startups. If you feel that there's a problem that you have with any kind of company and then it has to do with the racial aspect, you can always go and report it to the BBBE Commission. There is a commissioner there that does that job, and even the Competition Commission as well. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our panel discussion. And Mr. Kwate says we've got our work cut out. The work continues. As we're chairing G20, next year, Mr. Kwate, where are we? Can you refer to us? If we were president of G20, next year, where is South Africa at? Give us the scoop, since you are involved.
Well, the G20...
Sorry, Chair.
Can I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just one, before you make an input. It's a very simple one. By the way, I'm Colonel Makelele from SB Connect Africa. I'm a journalist. Mr. Kwate, why did you choose Johannesburg for the November summit? For obvious reasons, my friend. Cape Town would have been the best choice. And yes, I'm Cape Townian and I'm very biased. Because we do have the infrastructure, we have the experience, we have the people, we could have advertised Africa better than anyone else. Johannesburg today has a water crisis problem, which is a legacy argument that's going to come post G20. So what was the rationale in choosing Johannesburg in a time when Johannesburg had so many infrastructure problems that are going to be with us for the next 5 years beyond our chairmanship of the G20?
All right. Mr. Kwet, I'm giving you 10 seconds to reply to this question, but also tell us what we do next year. That's very important. Because I had there was a unanimous, so because of time, you stepped out when I was looking for you. Can he address it, the question later on, because we just need to conclude, because I think there are other colleagues who want to fly out of the province to go to experience other tourism in another province as well.
Okay, let me start with where we next year, and then I'll talk to the issue about Johannesburg. The G20, as you know, does not have a permanent secretariat, so it is managed by a troika of countries at any given time. So the previous president, the current president, and the incoming president work together to manage the affairs of the G20. So when Brazil was the president, South Africa was part of the troika as the incoming president, and India was the outgoing president. So India, Brazil, South Africa were running the G20. Now India is out of the picture. Now the outgoing is Brazil, South Africa. The next is the US. So next year, during the US presidency, we will be part of the troika again as the outgoing president, the US, and if we follow tradition, the next country in 2027 will be the UK, because that's where the G20 went after 2008. So we will still be in the G20. It's up to the president of the G20 in terms of how they involve the other members of the troika, to what extent. But the members of the troika are usually very important in terms of organizing the forum and getting the initial text of the declarations negotiated. You want to get the troika members on your side first, and then you go out to the other members of the G20. So generally, that's how the G20 has been run over the years, and we will still be in the troika. The US has not participated in all the meetings during our presidency, but they do participate in meetings of the troika in particular. They have not missed one, and they will be participating in the summit at some level. So we believe that we will still have a very significant role to play in the affairs of the G20 during the US presidency next year. Now the question about why is the summit being held in Johannesburg, given all its known service delivery challenges? There was a deliberate effort that government undertook before we became president of the G20, sometime during last year, early last year. A team was assigned to visit KZN, Western Cape, and Johannesburg to assess state of readiness to host the summit, and they were looking at a number of things. Firstly is the question of availability of airports that can accommodate the amount of private aircraft that will be flying in and parked. Remember, these are not commercial aircraft. The leaders of the G20, each one of them comes in a big airplane which they are going to park. And so we're looking at airports that can accommodate those types of aircraft and park them there for the duration of the leaders' presence in the country. So Johannesburg has advantages because it has OR Tambo International Airport, it has Waterkloof Air Force Base, it has Lanseria International Airport. So you have 3 airports in one area that can take that number of aircraft. And remember, the G20, as I said earlier, we invite other countries that are not members. So in total, we expect that there will be about 63 heads of state who will be participating, and most of them will come in their own chartered aircraft, private aircraft, and they will park them at our different airports. Already, we have spoken to OR Tambo, to Lanseria, to Waterkloof Air Force Base, and they've indicated the availability of parking that they are accommodating to the leaders to park their aircraft. Secondly is the issue of accommodation. Again, Johannesburg, Gauteng has advantages as opposed to KZN and Western Cape. In Cape Town, you're looking at hotel availability. Cape Town has many hotels as Cape Town. But when you look at Johannesburg, remember Johannesburg has advantages in that it's closest to Pretoria, it's also closest to Ekurhuleni. So some of the leaders will be actually staying in Pretoria. They still have access to Johannesburg, others are staying in Ekurhuleni, which Cape Town advantage that Cape Town does not have. So you're looking at, in Cape Town, you're looking at the leaders staying in Cape Town, the closest other place, maybe Stellenbosch and other places. So Johannesburg has got an advantage in that it has another metro next to it, two other metros next to it. So the issue of accommodation was also looked at, and that is where Johannesburg had advantages as compared to KZN and the Western Cape. The other thing, again, with regard to Johannesburg, you look at the fact that we have had a number of summits already at that level. So at the government operational level, organizing level, you have a number of entities coming together. Ekurhuleni is part of the organizing team. Tshwane is also part of the organizing team. Also, logistically, not just in terms of providing accommodation and providing airports, but those entities of those municipalities are also involved. The fire department, the metro department, and everywhere. So Ekurhuleni and Tshwane are part, whereas if you brought it to Cape Town, then you would have to bring those from outside of the province. So those are some of the factors that were looked at, and then the conclusion was that the summit would then be going to Johannesburg.
Mr. Surprise Malias, thank you so much. I want to invite you to close the meeting and just give an appreciation of in a few seconds time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Director of the program, for such a wonderful discussion. And time has always been a limit in discussion like this. And no doubt that when you listen to this perspective, Mr. Mkhali, you would realize that in as much as we have agreed with UNISA that we will continue with this theme, but my view is that we need to start to draw attention around the components of our fiscal framework. That discussion, having listened to all the perspective here, is that we need to bring national treasury. And DDG, having listened to yourself, especially given a policy perspective, the question of small business has always been central. And I think that when I listen to yourself and Mr. Kwete around the regulations of these small businesses, and best countries to learn from, it's India and Brazil. Mr. Mkhale here has been a consul general in Brazil. And I think that if you look at the nominal GDP of India, their biggest contributing factor is small business. Nigeria included, in as much as perhaps their biggest sector is oil and telecommunication, but small business has always been counted on how they calculate their GDP. So a fiscal framework question is very important in South Africa, because we have always been having the attitude of big corporates or nothing, investing a lot of focus on listed companies. And of course, even if you look at these listed companies in terms of their total capitalization, you find that the biggest segment of our economy is captured by few companies at a macro level. So the question of SMEs is very critical, and that's why in terms of restructuring our theme, we have to look at the components of our fiscal framework. And thanks very much, Mr. Kwete, for giving us even the Africa perspective, because it has always been and will always be the centerpiece of our foreign policy, and the development of our continent, of course, it's in our interest as a country. And we are glad that in terms of the participation of the African Union and countries that you have mentioned, we believe that beyond South Africa, and not only at a multilateral level, we have to have, at least at a sub-regional level, all countries being represented permanently at the G20 level, and that will then represent growth on the continent. May I thank UNISA as our strategic partnership, and as we go forward, we are going to UKZN on Thursday, and of course in Northwest that other week. So we'll round up provinces. I spoke to the DDG that beyond the summit, we'll have to come back to the Western Cape and talk about the outcome of the summit. And I think that is very critical. For us, of course, we look at these things at a state level, not necessarily because we are we are a unitary state. So the growth of our country, will have to look at it in that manner because we are not a federal state. So in as much as yourself, you have to protect the growth of Western Cape, it contributes towards the national GDP, which is good for the country. But discussions like this, of course, it has to go beyond this room, and will encourage yourself as UNISA to have this kind of platforms with the province. Ourselves, from public diplomacy point of view and from the department itself, would want to go beyond just the sector of tourism. We wanted the financial sector to participate, especially the banking space, in terms of the financial inclusion. We believe that the small businesses, they are suffocating, of course, in terms of trying to find a way on financial exclusions. And thank you very much, my good doctor. And of course, you are encouraging us to follow the suit. And congratulations once again. I'm told that UNISA have organized something for you as panelists, as we once again conclude this discussion. It's always difficult to be put between the very strategic item of the component of the event called catering and the people. So you will bear with us. Mr. Mkhale has made sure that you will have some refreshment, and thank you very much as we conclude the program. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I've been given the privilege of handing over the token of appreciation. I know that you have, thank you so much, DG, hoping for more engagement with you in the program. Really appreciate it. I know that you have, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Mr. Kwete, should I keep it to my office or your company?
That would be a problem because I have to declare this.
You must declare. This is how much is worth, please. Yeah. I'd like to take this. Thank you. We should have a group picture quickly, Mr. Kwete. So the meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you so much. We just want to take a group picture, and then sure. Lunch is served outside. Thank you so much. Yes, we'll send it right here. Should we sit or I think we should
Thank you.
Should we get the chair for meeting or